Families of apartheid-era victims and survivors that have failed to get justice from the South African government in relation to prosecutions of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission cases want to be paid constitutional damages. They also want a commission of inquiry to be established to probe what they allege is political interference by successive government ministers to prevent perpetrators being brought to book. On Monday this week, 25 families of victims of political crimes submitted an application to the Pretoria High Court against President Cyril Ramaphosa and his government, claiming that their right to justice has been violated. To talk more about this, we're now joined by the Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights, Zaid Kimmie. A very good evening to you. Thank you for your time. I mean, the Foundation for Human Rights and the 25 families of victims and survivors of the apartheid-era atrocities are seeking justice. You're part of this. Talk to us about what is contained in that document headed to court.
Thank you very much. Well, the request that we're making is threefold.
Yeah.
One, we want a recognition that the rights of these victims have been violated because the cases that were passed on to the NPA weren't properly investigated or prosecuted. We would like a commission of inquiry to investigate how that interference happened, who was responsible, and what actions they took, and why whatever instructions they gave were acceded to. And finally, there is the request for constitution of damages, which is an amount of money to be set aside to assist families in their further pursuit of justice or memorialization of the victims involved.
With this case, I mean, it's been described as a landmark lawsuit which really targets government officials. What are you hoping to achieve here as the quest for justice continues? Well,
I think that aim is twofold. One, certainly for the families who are bringing this action, they would like some answers about why their particular cases were not properly investigated and prosecuted. But the broader question is, of course, that failure to prosecute apartheid-era crimes is a failure of the right of law and of justice. And what we've seen subsequently is a culture of impunity, where people can commit crimes safe in the knowledge that they'll never be prosecuted and that questions will never be asked. And what we want to demonstrate in this very important case is that if people do not do their jobs, they do not fulfill their constitutional obligations, that there will be consequences and they will be called to account for the decisions they made. And hopefully that will go some way towards restoring the rule of law in our country, where, as we've seen over and over again, people can commit crimes and simply never be called to account for them. And we hope that by doing this, we'll make some small contribution towards ensuring that that culture of impunity is reversed.
Talk to us about some of the applicants and what they've had to endure over the years, seeking answers, seeking closures, and not seeing anyone being prosecuted over their cases.
Yeah, so many of these cases, of course, are apartheid-era, all of them. So we're talking about cases that are at least 35 and in some cases 45 or 50 years, where the families have consistently asked that they be given progress reports, that they be told what is happening to their cases, and they've simply been given the runaround. Successive heads of the NPA have not acted on their constitutional obligation. They've been given the runaround, and they've gone to court several times to force in individual cases that some action is taken. And we want to admit there has been progress over the last 4 or 5 years, and there's been real progress in some cases. But for the vast majority of these cases, the perpetrators are no longer alive, and any possibility of justice has passed. And so we know what the original crime was. The original crime was the murder or disappearance of these activists.
Very well.
What we will now want to focus on is what that subsequent injustice was. That when given the opportunity to investigate and the obligation to investigate and prosecute, that the state failed in that obligation. And so we want to focus on how that failure happened, who was responsible, and have them come forward and account for their actions.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening as we leave that conversation there, speaking there to the Executive Director for the Foundation for Human Rights, Zaid Kimmie.